Welcome back to another edition of History in Your Own Backyard. I'm Susie Selleck, and today we are in Enochsburg, Indiana. We are at St. John's Catholic Church, and I'm joined by Joe Stein. Joe, thanks for coming in today.
Oh, you're very welcome.
So we are standing in a beautiful church, and I would love for you to talk about how the first church here was built. Well, and maybe take us back a little.
Okay. Originally, the parish was started in approximately 1840. And it originally started with a wooden structure just to the east of this church where we're standing. And if I remember right, I think it's a 40 by 70 structure, made out of hewed logs primarily. Okay. And the local parishioners of course done all the work from the local timber and the forest here. And that worked pretty good for the church till at that time, Enochsburg was really moving on the edge of the frontier, so it outgrew it already by 1856, 1857.
So then this second structure had to come about.
That brings us to the stone church era.
Okay. Now I understand some of the stones that second structure was to be built with, families were actually responsible for bringing a certain amount of stones, is that right?
Yes, it's pretty well documented and written that basically 40 families of the parish dedicated their time to quarry enough rock to build this church. And 40 parishioners went down to the local creek east of here, about a quarter mile, and spent about 2 years quarrying rock to bring up to build this church. And at that time, of course, a quarter mile, that was all uphill. They used their beast of burden, which was basically mules and cows and oxen type animals.
Transport.
Very few horses, because horses were expensive at that time and people couldn't afford horses. So it's kind of a strange twist there.
Yeah.
And so they pushed their oxen carts and up the hill here and bringing the rock for the church.
Now, about how long did it take start to finish to complete the structure using that method of transportation and just obviously the building process?
Maybe I'll get into the amount of rock it took, if it's appropriate.
Oh, yeah.
Well, at that time they measured the rock in perches, which is a quantity of rock. They didn't have scales in them days, so you had to have some kind of a measurement to keep everybody kind of on even keel, how much rock they were bringing up. So the foreman measured off a 16.5-foot pole, and you had to lay your rock out 16.5 foot long down by the creek there, 18 inches tall, or 18 inches wide and 1 foot tall. And that was a perch of rock. And I calculated out in the pounds per cubic foot of rock, that comes out to about 2 ton per perch. 2 ton, 4,009 pounds of rock make a perch. So you times that by the 40 families times 25 perches, it comes up with some astronomical number of 1,600 ton or something like that.
Oh my gosh.
That had to be brought up out of the creek with your oxen and mules and stuff like that.
So Joe, there was a tragedy. Tell us about that a little bit.
Okay, after the walls were completed, they were constructing the major trusses for the roof, and the trusses were pre-assembled on the floor, and they were made out of 8 by 8 timbers, 8 inches square, and the width of the church, 50-some feet long.
Right.
And so these are heavy, complicated trusses that had to be lifted up and set on top of the wall. In the process, the first couple went pretty good, but then tragedy struck and the scaffold board broke and one of the trusses came crashing down. And that was a tragedy for everybody. Gerhard Bowman, the son of Gerhard Bowman was killed at that time. So was the son of the contractor that was helping to build the church. His son was killed, and all kind of injuries, broken bones. And so the church was completed about, I think, 1856. And they had to kind of settle down and get their finances in order. And I think 1866, the bells were added to the belfry.
And how many bells?
And there's three bells. And I think the big one weighs up toward 1,500 pounds. So it's really a pretty good sized bell.
So tell me about the clock that's up on the steeple.
Oh, okay. The clock was brought in, what was that, 1886, I believe.
Yep.
And it is a 4-face clock, so you can see it in any direction up in the tower. And at that time, there's no electricity, so it was wound and powered by weights that were hoisted up on a weekly basis. It's called an 8-day clock. And so the weights, I think the biggest of which weighs over 1,000 pounds, is cranked up, and the weight of the weight going down is what powers the clock and the chimes that strike on the quarter hour, half hour, and the hour. So it's a really, and it's a very rare feature. Our clock people in Cincinnati say it's the only one they know of in probably the state of Indiana that's active still the way it was 100-some years ago.
That's impressive.
So that's pretty unique.
So in 2001, the structure got a bit of a facelift. Can you elaborate on that?
Okay, yes, certainly. I was pretty directly in charge of that, rebuilding the superstructure, the steeple, which had deteriorated over the years, weather had gotten in, and birds and bats and such things.
Right.
So it caused deterioration, and we had to put new beams and basically rebuild the steeple as it was originally. And we finished it off with a stainless steel roofing that was pretty well guaranteed for another 100 years.
Yeah.
So we're after the longevity of keeping this church going.
I can tell. Joe, are these windows and the altar, are these original
Okay.
pieces?
The windows were at a little bit later date. They were added, the stained glass windows were added. And Pacific members of the parish donated or financed each window, which has their name on it.
Oh, okay.
Which brings us up, the families that live here, many of these are original families that got their names on the windows,
But in the altar, was that a structure that's from the original?
Okay, that's pretty well original. Yes, that was put in, at the early when the church was built.
Joe, the organ upstairs.
Oh yes,
yeah.
The organ,
Let's talk about that gorgeous organ.
Yeah, it's another very rare piece, according to the people we work with in Cincinnati to have it restored in, I believe, in 1998. The organ was put in 1884, and it's very original. First, it was pumped by bells that made the air to make the organ work.
Before electricity.
Wow. And finally, in 1938, electricity came to being, and they had the luxury of a blower to supply the air to tone the organ.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And she blows pretty good in here, right?
Oh yes.
It sounds impressive.
Yes.
It's got to be. So the structure out back, the grotto, that was dedicated in 1954?
Yes, that's true. Our servicemen from World War II, they were so thankful to get back to the country safe. And so they took on themselves, again, going down to the Salt Creek and mining the rock and bringing it up the hill. They built this grotto in honor of the Queen of Peace, which is the Virgin Mary.
Yeah.
And of course, most of those gentlemen have now passed away. The one surviving member at this point in time that I know of is Hubert Raver.
Okay. Wow, and a surviving member.
Yes.
In that dedication. This has been another edition of History in Your Own Backyard. I'm Susie Selleck. We were in Enochsburg, Indiana today with Joe Stein, and we were at the St. John's Parish Church. So remember, travel slowly and stop often.